Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our weekly market overview, where we try to get a gauge on the market and look towards any pathing that we can have for this week to come. Quick disclaimer: anything you see in this video is not financial advice. It's merely for educational purposes. And with that, let's get started. All right, starting off, we're gonna look at the weekly here. Our weekly candle for SPY. With our weekly candle here, I mean, it's first of all, it's fairly bullish. Def the indicator for that is we have a huge lower wick, indicating buyers stepped in very strongly near the lows. We don't really have much of a wick at the top. So it is more very strong hammer candle, you could say. But overall, just a very strong um, bullish bullish candle here. We do have a higher low off of the massive push that we had recently. It is a little bit lower on the weekly trend, so we did create a little bit of a lower high, um, or a lower low rather, but we created a higher high as well. So it did give us a little bit of a range expansion that we were looking for. Last week we were talking about there was a little bit of compression happening. So this week we did have a little bit of a range expansion, which was good. So overall bullish candle. We see here buyers stepped in near the midpoint here of our massive push up. So we did have buyers step in pretty strongly
Hey,
towards the lows here. Um,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you. The stream isn't really loading. Honestly,
is it not?
yeah, I can't see it, and a couple other people are saying they can't see it either.
Here, let me go ahead and restart the stream for you guys. I'll open up the chat as well so I can see. All right. All right, you guys see it fine now?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty. So pretty much what I was saying was we just had buyers step in pretty strongly towards the midpoint in our previous push up here. We definitely expanded the range. We did have a lower low, but we did create a higher low as well. So we did get a little bit of a range expansion as opposed to last week where we had that compression there. Looking to either get that springboard to the upside. We didn't really get that just yet, but with our buyers stepping in so strongly towards the lows of last week, you notice where we have our candle close here, um, or the body of our candle close rather. So we did have buyers step in pretty strongly here. We just had a little bit of a look below, but with this long wick, is showing me that buyers did step in pretty heavily, near the lows to really push us back into that range, and into our EMAs. We'll go into the daily in a second here, and you'll see how those our daily moving averages had effect. But for now, we did have a push over it, and we're looking towards our next area of a retest, which is going to be this upper bounds of this range here. So we I'm going to go ahead and draw a little bit of a box here, right? So let's say our box is, oh my God, I cannot draw a straight line. There we go. Okay, see, let's say our box is here. The midpoint of that is going to be right around here. So we are in the upper bounds of the range. We want to start testing this range here, and have some price action support in this range, for us to have that expansion and push out of it. That's going to also correspond to our bear flag that, we're still technically in a bit of a bear flag. It's a little bit wider, but we're still in a bear flag, so we haven't had the break out of the bear flag. For me, what I'm looking for currently is our blue line here is our 50 daily SMA. So the last 50 days of price action, this is the average. um so if we can have price action at least close over there, even if we reject the 200 and maintain a bearish standpoint, that's fine as well. Um, but we want to see price action at least recapture this 50 SMA. to look for any continued upside, right? So look for a retest of this area here or a retest of our 200. And if we get that we have the huge flush down, a nice bounce, this rejection of the 200 is going to be very indicative of a overall bear trend for the next, year or two, right? So this is going to be pretty crucial to see if we can recapture this, right? So the first thing we were looking for initially, um, actually, let's go to the daily so that way you guys can see it clearly. Pretty much covered most of the weekly here. So for the daily here, I'm gonna close my thing. All right. So for the daily here, what we're looking for, right, is any price action. Let's do red. Red is the only thing I have that's close to purple here. Um, our 200 is right there. So we were looking to maintain any price action under the 200, right? So initially, once we had this bear trend playing out day after day, right, we had several days of downward price action. We were looking for a retest of that 200 to give us further flushes. So we did get that, right? Our next step that we were looking for was to see if we could have. I wasn't expecting a dead cat bounce by all means, definitely not a massive dead cat bounce like that. But I did want to see us try to recapture here. Let's do that in yellow. Recapture our 5 SMA here just to show signs of a short-term recovery, and look for any further rejections, right? So we were looking to see if we continue to reject the 20 here. That's going to be your medium to long-term trend, right? Is the 20-day moving average. So we wanted to see if our 5 is going to give us that support, which is going to mean that we have a short-term recovery, right? And the next step was to see if we have our longer term downwards trend continuing, right? So we once we had the push above, we did have a little bit of a push down. I'm sure this was, if I'm not mistaken, news related. So kind of broke us out of the 5 pretty fast. Right, we did have a rejection a few times as well. Lately, the news has kind of been throwing us for a loop, but our moving averages do still hold some weight. So as far as our structure and trend lines, it may get invalidated quite often, but our moving averages are still going to be a good headwind to the direction that we want to see price action move towards, right? So this week we did have the push underneath, a slight gap down. When we filled that, we had a huge gap up here, a gap up that actually put us in over the 20 SMA here. The following day, we did get a support near the 20. And since then, we had a pretty decent bull rally above. So our next target is going to be where our 50 SMA is here, as well as our large volume note. If you noticed, our 50 is kind of corresponding with a pretty decent volume note here. So a recapture here is going to give you enough volume to test this area, as well as enough volume in this area for price action to hit a wall and actually start to flush pretty deeply as well. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin at the moment. But this is kind of where any upside targets are going to be looking for. So even if we have a push down, like right now, futures is actually low right now, right? We're gapping down, was pushing down, probably all wondering what is Smoove talking about if we're pushing down. Um, it doesn't show it now. So what I'll do is I'll mimic it so you guys can see what I mean. So currently on a gap down, all right, price action is let's see what other colors I have. Orange. Price action is somewhere right here towards the bottom of this range here. So we did have a push down, so it's gapping down a little bit, right? But if you look, we're still going to look for a test of our 5-day moving average, or even if we do end up pushing down and in the morning, um you know whoever shorted the top on Friday, right? Because we did have just some massive pushes up. So any short sellers on Friday are going to most likely be covering on Monday. So what that means is we actually might get another retest here near our 20, as long as we are maintaining price action over this 20 daily moving average here, we can still look for upside. So I wouldn't be too cautious or too worrisome of our gap down this evening, but just wanted you guys to at least see what I mean by where price would be currently, right? So we're currently here and our 5 is already crossed over our 20, right? That's actually what I'm looking for this week, is to see if our 5 holds over it. We'll know better once the market actually opens, because with futures, um it's just gonna have wherever we open up. So if we opened up above, it's gonna shoot the 5 day pretty high, since the last 5 days, 4 of those days are gonna be up here. So the five, of course, is gonna be a little bit higher, but we'll know more as the market opens, or even around 9, 8:30, 9 o'clock. We'll know for sure where the 5 is really wanting to place itself. But for now, like I said, it's starting to push over, so it's not necessarily in immediate bearish sentiment with us pushing down. Um, Forgot to mention here our daily candle. Just looking at the daily candle, similarly, we do have a bullish candle here, um, and is also a bullish continuation, right, where we have our body of our candle closing above the previous day's candle. So it's not necessarily a strong bullish candle like this. It's more of a bullish continuation, right? Are we continuing a up? Are we continuing an uptrend? I don't know why my hand keeps, or my thing keeps doing that. Okay. So like we're in an uptrend here, right? Say this is our channel here. We're in an uptrend. Our candle here is just showing us continuation of that uptrend with equal supports near the 20-day moving average currently. So one thing I'm looking for, like I said, I want to make sure that we start to close over the daily here, and our 20 continues to maintain as support, because this 50 daily moving average is going to be the target, but it's going to be the target for everyone, right? This is where everyone's eyes are set on. And what does the market continue to do? Many more times than not, is they will steal you as exit liquidity before it even happens, right? So if we do have an uptrend, it might just stop somewhere right here, and the 50 can just be just above it, and then just continue to flush down. At least if we start breaking underneath the 540 43, it's showing 542 here, but 543 is my pivot. I'm going to show you that in a second here, once I post all my lines here. But 543, so I'll break underneath there. It's going to probably lead us towards this next high volume note, which is our 524 area. So just be on the lookout for that. So if we do have an upside, your target of the 50 daily SMA and the large volume note that we saw on the weekly is the same thing that majority of traders are going to be looking for. So you want to be a little bit quicker than that, and you see green, you start taking green on any upside, especially as soon as we start breaking over Friday's highs. That's probably going to be a nice I guess indicator of any positive momentum for any calls. So Monday opens, even if we gap down, once we close over the 5, I would just look for our levels along the way and try to take profit along the way as we start breaking over the Friday's highs. As far as lows, like I would not even consider any lows until we go underneath the 20 daily moving average. So I wouldn't even consider downside until we break underneath that. I know that's like a 10-point range, $10 range there, but I don't want to be in a put and price decides to have one of these, right? Not to say that it's gonna happen, but nowadays our news affects the market so drastically that it just takes one funny statement from Trump for the market to just go up $4. So just be on the lookout for stuff like that. But if we do have a break underneath the the 20 here, most likely we're gonna have institutional selling that's gonna override those news, right? You might have a small pump off of news, but it'll just continue in the direction that it was going in the first place, because institutions have not exited their positions. Institutions buy direction. Retailers, we try to chase that direction, right? Right. And then just looking at our levels here, our pivots here. This is kind of what I was talking about before, where we have our pivot here at 543. It was previously where we had the rejection here, multiple rejections here, and before we had the gap down. So this is pretty much the midpoint of that range that I was mentioning earlier, where we have the lower bounds of the range being uh, the lower bounds of our range being this area and the upper bounds being here. We're sort of in the midpoint here. So I would look for any price action to maintain over it or below it for upside or downside. So 543 is going to be our major pivot for the week. As far as our strong upsides and our downsides, this is going to be our weekly pivots. Last week, our strong pivotal point was actually the 530 mark, if I'm not mistaken. So we did have a clear over that. And just to kind of show you guys what I mean by, or at least why I use these strong pivotal points pretty often, because they're going to be the large volume nodes. As you notice, they're large volume nodes in our price action here. And typically price will gravitate towards them, but I look more on the weekly. So last week I'll draw it in red. Last week our pivot was here, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, here 519. So we were in kind of a compression, and I was waiting for some type of expansion. So if we had, let's say, entered a short here, it was a pretty decent move on the day. Even though we closed here, you still probably would have been in profit. On the opposite side here, if we wanted to look for some upside, our strong was right here. So any upside is pretty clear. Ooh, oh, I drew it a little too wide there. Upside is pretty clear. It was a pretty decent range here, 530 to 550, almost a $20 range. Of course, we did have the gap up, so you can really say that you captured this bottom end of this range. But us actually opening here on 2 days price action maintaining over here, um, it was pretty clear that we had some potential upside um, left in the market, especially if we're going to maintain price action over the 20. So that's just kind of how I look at the pivotal points here. Um, let's go to the hourly here. And then this is where you're going to see the millions of lines that I do have. So let's go ahead and try to come up with a little pathing here. So just to go over what we were looking for last week. So last week we were looking to see if we can get sort of a head and shoulders pattern to be playing out. We were looking for the shoulder to be somewhere around here, like a little bit deeper. Oops, sorry, a little bit deeper around here, or even possibly a shoulder right around here. But we did get an equal shoulder over here. Last week I was mentioning that, sometimes we don't necessarily get a shoulder that's going to be equal. Actually, this week we did actually get that. So we had an equal shoulder push out. Confirmation was the break over the swing highs here. So we did have our inverse head and shoulders play out. Like I said, it didn't necessarily play out exactly how I was anticipating, but we didn't have that breakout as well. One thing that I also noticed is that we did have, I'm pretty sure I brought it up last week, but we do have a little bit of a cup and a handle here pulling out breakout here as well. So we did have a nice cup here with our handle being the rejection off our pivot here at 543. A little bit of a pullback. The pullback wasn't necessarily that strong. I think I have it on my 30-minute here. Yeah, so our 30-minute here, it wasn't necessarily a strong pullback. It was more of just a retrace of an attempt to retrace the gap. But buyers did step in towards this 534 level, which we saw on the weekly was a pretty large note. Where a lot of volume is taking place. So it was nice to see us have this slow grind down. It wasn't necessarily a deeper pullback here on the 30-minute. You can see like our green and our blue here being a deeper, stronger pullback here. It wasn't necessarily that strong of a pullback. We have upper and lower body wicks. showing that there was a struggle with buyers and sellers. Buyers stepping up at the lows and sellers stepping up strongly at the highs. But our trend still was not as strong, I would say, for a downtrend. All we had was consistent retest of the 20 here. As you see, our 20 daily moving average here was tested multiple times. So go back to the 1 hour here, kind of see what we can anticipate for this week. One thing that I always look out for is here. I'll show you right now. So one thing I'm looking for is to see if we create a little bit of a head and shoulders here, right? Where we have a confirmation is probably going to be the break out of this yellow channel here. But you could probably early entry off the break of this smaller yellow trend here. We have a weak or orange trend here. We have a weaker buying trend. It's not necessarily as strong as our green here. So it's a little bit of a slower grind up. So you could easily draw this trend line yourself. It's the orange one here. I'll zoom in a little bit better so you guys can see what I mean. Um, talking about this orange trend here. Draw it out yourself. You're going to see, and once again, when I draw my lines, they are equal. So if you want, I would start drawing this trend line first, copy and paste it to the bottom end here, and you'll see it does line up. Um, so let's go back towards our pathing here. And for the downside, like I said, I'm looking for a little bit of a head and shoulders to play out here, with the confirmation is going to be the break out of this here with some strength. So I want to start seeing a selling channel building out here, something like this, where we have our shoulder, our shoulder going to be the break out of it, right? So we're going to have something like this, where we have a break continuation, retest of this lower bounds of this range, this 543 level here. And that's where we're going to possibly have a little bit of a bounce to retest this range, create our shoulder here near our struggle point over here, where we have multiple rejections in this area, the 543, where we struggled. Once we got over 543, there was a bit of a struggle. And we do have a little bit of a decent volume in this range around the 543, 542 area here. So a break underneath there, creating our shoulder somewhere around here, or a push down, which I kind of drew the shoulder a little bit weird, but something like this. We can look towards the downside for a head and shoulder here. For any inverse head and shoulder, there's usually a head and shoulders that is lurking behind. What do I mean by that? I mean, we have here where we have an inverse head and shoulders here playing out, right? Where we have our shoulder here and our head here. Usually right off of that, we'll have this is where our traps start to take place, and we look to see if trend lines are holding up, because right off of that inverse head and shoulders, we can easily come up with a head and shoulders that will push us out of that range. So I'm going to be looking out for that as well. Definitely 543. 543 is going to be pretty, I would say pretty strong as our pivot, because we're going to have not only push underneath it, but to create that shoulder, that right shoulder, we would need to at least have some rejections here. So if we do have a push down, wherever that may lead us, we want to see us retest the 543 level and that be a rejection, and that would give us our shoulder. It would get invalidated if we broke over the 543, so just bear that in mind. And as far as downside, I'm looking for an inverse head and shoulders, similar to last week. Last week I was a little bit more tighter in the range, so I'll try to be a little bit more loose with that this week. So for our inverse head and shoulders, one thing I'm going to be looking for is our shoulder, our right shoulder to be here. Oh, that is wrong. Our right shoulder to be here, our left shoulder to be here. And we do have a push out of this orange here and a retest of our 543 level here. So 543 is going to be the retest where we have that break out of it. But I want to see not only a break out of this, but I want to see us maintain price action inside of this trend line here, where we have kind of a struggle here where we have, if you notice, there's a lot of upper wicks and lower wicks. So what I mentioned before, we have sellers stepping up pretty strongly at the top and buyers stepping up pretty strongly at the bottom. That's kind of what our trend lines are going to be here, where we have a break out of this is going to be a loss in confidence, and a break over this is going to be a gain in confidence and price action. So if we do have a break out of here, an inverse head and shoulders can give us something where we start testing the bottom end of that range here. Um, so let's just, say have some squiggly lines around here. And once we have a push up to retest that 543 area, we'll have that struggle. And then we look for that upside here. The shoulder is not necessarily going to be as clean, right? So we're going to be looking for, let's draw it in yellow. We're going to be looking for our SMAs to start catching up here. Our 5 is of course going to be our 5 is of course going to be over our 20 here. So we start seeing our 20 curl somewhere around here. That will give us that 20-day daily moving average retest that I was talking about to see if we can support. So we did have strong supports around here. So if we do have this gap down that pushes us out, as long as we are over it, it could just be playing out an inverse head and shoulders. I'll get rid of the weird squiggly lines and just kind of give it a little bit clearer of a pattern here, where we have our shoulder going to be something like this, where we have price action like that, right? Where we have an inverse head and shoulders, something like that, where we can start to recapture, where we do have a retest out of this range with strength over 543, because once we start having price action over there, we're going to have buyers stepping in pretty strongly. We do want to see if we do have some pullbacks taking place that are not necessarily as strong. Like I said, I don't want to see strong selling taking place, something that's pretty deep like that. If we do have some type of controlled selling that's taking place, once we break over the 543, right, we want to see a break under first. This is where we start to exhaust buyers, but we need to trap the sellers as well. So that's where we're going to see possibly a bounce in this range here to push us out. And we want to see what happens around the 543 level to see if we can have a push above. Most likely, once we do get that push above, a retest of it is fairly likely. If not, if we do not get necessarily that retest of it, we could just have a gap up around this range where we're supporting near the highs here, right? Where we had a push down here. So if we're supporting around this 547 level, right? If we do have a gap up and we're supporting over this level here, it still kind of gives us that inverse head and shoulders for a push up. So there is two sides to it. So we really want to see if we can have that pullback, but we don't want to lose this trend line here. Just yet, at least. Our EMAs are going to be catching up. So our major thing is going to be looking at our daily moving average to see if it will act as support once again. Otherwise, if we do have um if we do have our green curling like that and our 5 starting to break above, as long as we do have a push down and we retest that 5 and confirm off, we don't even need the test of the 20. All we need is the 5 to maintain price action over the 20, and that'll give us confidence that price wants to head towards the upper bounds of our weekly expected highs and our strong pivot point. This is the next gravitational large body volume note here. So be on the lookout for that for the SPY chart. If anybody has any questions, do let me know. Otherwise, I can move on to the QQQ here. No questions? Not one? Okay, so let's move on to the QQQ here. Okay, so our QQQ weekly candle. The first thing we're gonna look at as well is always the weekly here. So with our QQQ weekly, similar situation as SPY, right? We have a solid bullish candle here where we have buyers stepping up pretty strongly at the lower bounds of our range, as well as our previous low of the last week's compression that we had taking place. So we did have buyers stepping in pretty strongly around the lower part of this range here. But we didn't, one thing that we didn't see, similar with SPY, is we're not really seeing an area where sellers are deciding to step up, right? All we had is like we've just been exhausting sellers on the way up, and we continue to discourage any buyers on the way down, right? And what do I mean by that, right? We have gap downs, gap downs, gap downs, and then out of nowhere we have these slow grinds up that kind of just burns the premium on the way up. So that's exhausting all the sellers, and this is discouraging all the buyers, right? So we're kind of sitting in that point where we want to see some type of strong conviction taking place, and that's going to be when our moving averages start to converge here, where we have our five starting to cross over. You'll see in a bit here we're starting to see that slightly on QQQ once I go to the daily. But quickly to go back over what I was mentioning before was we didn't really see an area where sellers are stepping up strongly just yet. So this is possibly the range where I would see sellers stepping in. Is around here where we had a rejection. Previous to that, we were having rejections underneath this range. We couldn't even get a break above out of that range. So QQQ did break out of that. Our pivot here on QQQ, I think it was like 570 something or 560 something, 564 if I'm not mistaken. I'll go into the daily and we'll get the exact level. I believe it's 564 is around here. Yep, 564. And that's our pivot. So we did have a push over it pretty strongly, similar with SPY. And we're already starting to get that retest of this range here, clear engulfing of the previous day's range. In fact, 2 weeks previous day's range, we have just engulfed, right? Completely created that new higher high here, but we do want to see a rejection in this upper bounds of this range, right? This is where sellers are still in control. But we have not even gotten to that point yet, right? And what's sitting in the dead smack middle of that are 50 SMA, right? It's sitting there dead smack in the middle at 480. So I would like to see us push over here. If we do have a push over 480, I believe my pivot's 478, 80, if I'm not mistaken. We'll look at that in a second. But how do you manage so many channel patterns? Are these from different time frames? Um, so to answer your question, I keep them color coded. That helps a lot. So even if I'm looking at another time frame, let's say I'm looking for let's see if I can just pull up colors here, right? So if I'm looking for a bear flag to play out with our blue here, what I'll do is on the daily, I'll start to have our daily or 1 hour, I'll have my uptrend channels be in blue, to know that as long as we're breaking out of it or within it, we're still inside of that bear flag. So I try to color code it. It does help me a little bit as far as the different trends that are playing out, especially if it's a longer term trend. Um, Color coding it does help quite a bit. And then your next question is, are these from different? Oh yeah, so I guess I answered that question, right? So the colors I try to keep, I maintain them. Um, so that way if I go through different time frames, I kind of know what they are. The only thing that really doesn't change too much is going to be green and orange, because they do change quite a bit. So green is stronger uptrends or downtrends, and orange is going to be slower downtrends or uptrends that are not as strong. So those two will fluctuate between different time frames, but the colors usually maintain themselves no matter what time frame I'm on. And then also as an options capture, do you need to follow your simple moving averages? Most definitely. So with if I'm trading options, depending on if like where I'm in the chart. So if I'm looking to short and we're really close to the 20-day moving average, right? Our average for the last 20 days, if we're really close to that, the moment we start to fail there or even have rejections of there, I would feel very confident to enter a short and try to squeeze as much out of it as possible, right? So you can, if you're sitting between, let's say, the 5 and the 20, you pretty much just gonna look for the momentum, and once the momentum fizzles out, you kind of exit. But once we have rejections of like our major moving averages, you can pretty much squeeze it as far down as possible. And even if we have some miraculous bounce, it'll just be a lower high in the structure of a downtrend that's continuing. So it gives you more confidence, I would say. Whether we have some pushes and you start to get worried, it gives you a little more confidence, I would say. Hopefully that made sense. Do you feel the SMA is slower than the EMA? It is. It's. I mean, I wouldn't say it's slower. It's less reactive, right? So, um, our moving simple moving average is um an accurate what's it called, average of our last, let's say, I usually use the daily, so I'll look at the daily for a second, right? So our green here is our 20-day. So for the last 20 candles, it's gonna give me the average. And with the EMA, it's gonna give me the average of the last 20 days, but it's gonna give more significance to like the last five, if I'm not mistaken. So if we're in a downtrend here and our last five candles are bullish, my EMA is probably going to be pointing up, but my SMA is flat. So it might signal a slight uptrend, right? With your EMAs pointing up, it'll feel like that we're heading momentum wise in the upwards direction. But if I look at the five here, it's showing me that as well, right? So our last 5 days is also showing me that we're in an uptrend. With our 20 going to be my consistent average. I'm not gonna discredit either EMAs, but just essentially how I use it. I want the true average, and I don't want recent price action to overcloud the current average, right? Okay, so let's go back to our weekly here. I think we covered the weekly. Yeah. All right. So heading to our daily here. So our daily, similar to SPY here, um, we do have the same situation here where we have a bullish continuation, right? Where we have one green candle, kind of with our lows being the previous highs. So we're still in that sense where we're continuing an uptrend. Ooh, like that. We're continuing an uptrend, and we just have a bullish continuation, essentially, right? I wouldn't go so far to feel comfortable for going long until we start breaking over that 478 level. So that's where I was mentioning where we have a major pivot here. If you look at price action here, where we have kind of a choppiness right here, if we do have some price action that breaks over and supports in this range, it will kind of correspond with our 50 and having that push up. QQQ did outperform SPY quite a bit as far as how far it pushed into range here. So our pivot is pretty much closer to our 50-day moving average as well as our weekly here. The bear flag breakout is going to pretty much correspond with the bear flag invalidation rather is going to correspond with the break over our 50 here, with SPY being a little bit higher. I believe SPY is somewhere like near the midpoint of this range here. So it's slightly above the 50, while QQQ is literally just the recapture of the 50. It would invalidate our weekly bear flag because all of this uptrend is still part of our weekly bear flag. We're still in a weekly bear flag and we haven't invalidated it just yet. But QQQ is heading towards that right now, that point of invalidation. But we can still have a look above and fail, especially when we have one tricky little thing here is our 200 daily moving average right here. So, but it's still pretty much a decent range here, right? It's like a $4 range. Lately's been going way more than that. So can't really call it super decent, but it is a decent range. Where we do have, if we do have a break and support around here, a retest of that 200 is a $4 range. So it is a nice, decent risk to reward as long as we support over the 50 daily moving average here. So that's what I'm going to be looking for this week. As far as our pathing, it's not going to be um anything different. Oh, forgot. Right. Hopefully you guys caught that. That right here where I was mentioning before, I wanted to see our yellow, our 5-day moving average close over our 20 here. That's going to show us that we're in a short-term uptrend, right? With us supporting at our 20. So short-term uptrends where we're supporting in our major trend line, our major trend moving average. And then our short-term trend here is starting to push over our medium to longer term trend here. So we do have that push over it. So if we do have these gap downs that we're looking at earlier now, right, with price action pretty much going down pretty strong. I'm not too sure how much futures has fallen or if it's even reversing at this point. But our 5-day moving average can be a nice retest here for us to bring us back into this range here. Our 464 here. One thing I'm going to be I would probably say your major thing here, if you take anything out of what I say, as far as our trends here, I think the major thing that you can be looking at here is going to be, you want to see some bullish continuations over this 478 level, with a breakdown and a retest of this 464 level still being fairly strong as it was our weekly, our previous resistance multiple times here. So a retest of here and then a push towards that is still very, very possible for us to create a lower high, or I would say probably just a retest of this 464 level, for maybe a cheap buy in towards the 478 level. However, a break and a failure under this 464 is probably going to give us a retest of the lower bounds of this range here. And if we do fail this 454 level, our weekly pivot here, our weak pivot point, meaning that price action underneath it is going to be bearish. It kind of corresponds with this gap that we have here, coincidentally. So a break underneath there is going to give us that risk to reward towards trying to fill that gap. So your major things are going to be seeing if 464 is going to provide support, or if price can confirm over this 478.88 level for some upside and continuation of a bullish trend, and pretty much invalidation of our weekly bear flag. As far as our pathing here, I'm not going to I'm really not going to say that I see anything much differently than I do for SPY. So the pathing's pretty much going to be the same. I'll just quickly draw it out here, where we have a potential break out of here being our inverse head and shoulders. Look for a break out of this is our bear flag here on the daily. This is the lower bounds of our bear flag. If you noticed, I had a few different areas, right, where this is the upper bounds, the lower bounds, and this was kind of the mid ground of it on the weekly. So that's essentially what this smaller blue channel here is, that midpoint of that range. So to create that inverse head and shoulders, a break out of it here, and then a failure. Oh, and that would be your breakdown and rejection of the 464 level. Sorry, and give us some downside to look for this gap fill. And then for our upside, the same thing I'm looking for as SPY as well, where I'm looking for an inverse head and shoulders to play out, where we have this inverse head and shoulders that play out, where we have a head here, shoulder here, where we're supporting near our 5-day moving average, a bounce near a weak pivotal point here, where we have a decent amount of volume here, right? So this is where that fake out would take place. We might not get it right away today on this week, depending on how it takes place, but we could have that inverse head and shoulders play out here, where the confirmation is going to be the break out of this blue channel here. Or you could just look for this previous swing high breakout. That's going to be your break out of the inverse. Is going to be the break over the previous swing high. Oops, sorry, I drew that really badly. Our inverse here, with this being our trend line, so it's not going to be the same level. Let's clear it out to clean you guys up. Sorry, I was slightly distracted. Just got my food. So our inverse is going to be something like this, where we have our head testing their 20 here, and a push up here, where our second shoulder is going to be right around here, and our head's going to be here, and a break is going to be over this trend line here. Specifically, I would look to see if we break over here, and our target's going to be that 478 level. So that's pretty much what you can look for. It's the same thing as SPY, right? Where we're looking for an inverse head and shoulders, or a head and shoulders pattern. Which one is taking place, right? Do we have the head of our inverse, or do we have the shoulder, our right shoulder of our head and shoulders? So that's one thing I'm going to be looking for this week, especially with our candle being a continuation candle, rather than just a bullish candle, right? Like if we just had this big green candle when we closed, that would have been just a bullish candle. But our candle here is a bullish continuation. So now we want to see if that continuation is going to maintain, or we do have a retest of some supports for some breaks to the upside. So that's pretty much what I'm looking for this week, to see how Monday really takes place, maybe Monday or even Tuesday, to see how far back, if we do have a pullback, or even if we do have a continuation, right, where we have overnights flushing down but recovering quickly before open. And if we reject here again, then that would probably be signs that our sellers are going to finally step in this range. So that's one thing I'm looking for as well. Any other questions? All right, it's good to know about the distance. Yep, no, not a problem. I'm gonna go towards the IWM. I realize we're running low on time now. So quickly to our IWM, starting at our weekly here. Uh, Similar situation here, right? This is what I meant by having the same colors, right? So a break here is just going to be our larger bear flag. So I'm looking to see a break out of this, with the flag just being the smaller flag being invalidated here, but our larger weekly trend here still holding up a bear flag. So looking to see if that takes place this week. One thing that we look for last week, let's go to, I think the weekly, let's go to the weekly for a second. Last week, we were looking to see if a direction for IWM can take place here, right? So this was our strong pivotal point last week, and this was our, and this was our weekly. And I mentioned last week that as long as we're just chilling in this range here, it's pretty much a bear flag consolidation, and we don't really have any direction for the upside or the downside just yet. So this week we pretty much seen that, right, where we're just continuing to compress in this range. The only thing I was looking for last week was a break out of our range, to see if we could retest the upper and the lower bounds of our range here. Can't really say too much on the pattern wise. what patterns that are playing out. I honestly don't really see too much on IWM as far as patterns. I'm just looking to see any continuations. As you see here, oh, let's go look at the daily for a second before I go on. Our daily here, our daily, if you look at our candles here, it's not the same as SPY. We do have that break over our 20 here, where our 5 is showing signs of an attempt to have a continuation of a bull trend. But we have 3 days where we rejected at this 194 level. If you remember when I said on SPY and QQQ, we're looking for some type of rejection in a range and then looking for a support to uphold so we can continue. Um, IWM it has found its resistance. It has found the I would say the ceiling for the time being. So now the next thing we want to do is to look to see if we can create some support, where we can find support in that range here. So I'm looking for pretty much the bottom of this volume note to be as a support at this 190 area. I'll go into the smaller time frame so you can kind of see more levels, but we want to see a support take place here since we have already confirmed where our rejection point is. Um, and our candle here is not the same as SPY. If you notice, this isn't a bullish continuation, right? All we have is sellers that are not sellers, rather buyers that are exhausting near the top. On this day, on Wednesday, we did have a rejection in this range, right? This is where sellers stepped in. The following 2 days, we just had a point where buyers just exit, right? So this 194 level was just an area where buyers exited. It wasn't necessarily an area where sellers stepped in, but it is sort of a rejection, right? This is where we don't have that vote of confidence to go above 194 just yet. So we don't have that continuation. I mean, it is a stacking green candle with a higher high, but it did not create a higher low. So it's more of just a support within range here. If I look at the hourly here, we can see the same thing. We can pretty much see that taking place here, where we had Wednesday, where we had the rejection off of this area, and buyers stepped in near the 20 simple moving average or daily moving average, and then we had the push towards here where where buyers started to slow down. Once we had the gap down for whatever news that we had, another push up, and buyers also started to hesitate towards those highs. So I do want to see if we have some type of pullback and maybe support in the bottom of this range here. I'm not going to go for any major pathing. Like I said, I don't see much pathing out of IWM. But what I will say is I do want to see us create some value in this, right? So we had an upper bounds and a lower bounds range that I was mentioning last week, where we kind of were compressing in between and we did not break to find a direction in that range. So what I would like to see is if we do have a pullback and we support near this area here, where all we had was a massive nasty wick here, a dead cat bounce, and pretty much consolidation under, right? Let's get rid of all of these. Let's get rid of everything here so you guys can kind of see what I mean. Where I kind of want to see some type of price action take place in this range here and have that be a support, right? So we have a breakdown, sort of consolidate in this range, create some volume, right? We have an empty volume note here. Create some volume in this range for buyers to feel confident that price does not want to go lower, right? So that's one thing I'm going to be looking forward to see if we develop that consolidation with IWM. Consolidation happens quite often, right? Where we kind of just chop around in a range for quite some time. Even here, we chop around in a range. So we want to see buyers gain confidence, right? Because we don't have sellers selling aggressively, but we also don't have buyers having confidence over this area. So what would provide buyers confidence is going to be some price action in this range here, and we support for a push higher and we look to break over our previous highs. Again, target's going to be the 50 daily moving average. And then for our downside, similar thing. Let's go ahead and pull up this here. For our downside, we really just wanted to really want to see the failures here at this 185 level here, our weak pivot point. That's probably just going to be your major thing. You can look for some downside, where I know it's quite a bit away. It's almost $10 away. But like I said, if we do have a break here and we're consolidating this whole time for a push up, why would you look for a short here when the confirmation of failures is going to be around this range for a push fairly deep towards the bottom end of this range, right, where we have this chop? So it's better to get into a short to look for the next area of consolidation, or look for a longs in an area where we're creating more, where we create a more further consolidation and an upper range and push up, right? So same thing for both directions. So that's pretty much what I'm gonna be looking for. As far as our pivots here, that's pretty much the major points here is going to be underneath 185, and then our target for the upside is going to be over 200. I think if we break over 200, it's going to have a pretty decent push. Like we might even grab the 50 and actually push pretty decently up, because we do have some thin structure around this range here, right, where price kind of just went one direction, right, just kind of went straight down or straight up. So our recapture of this 200 area is going to be pretty important. And 194 here, so we want to start seeing 194 act as a support, as it's not necessarily a resistance just yet. It's just an area where price has not had confidence over. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. I think that about wraps it up here. I'll go ahead and post my notes on IWM, or not IWM, Tesla, Apple, and Nvidia. I kept it pretty short, just to kind of give you guys an idea of what I am looking for. If you guys want the levels right off the bat, I will show you a screenshot of that, so you guys can kind of look at that right away here. Taking a picture of my notes so you guys can see it. Pretty much what I'm looking for here. So if you want to take a screenshot, write down the levels, whatever the case may be, I'll leave it up here for a second. But that about wraps it up for me. I do want to make an announcement. So as you guys know, we were looking towards providing more of a big brother, big sister type role in our server. And we have come to a conclusion, and we have decided to announce that Silent Fluidity, who's in the chat right now, and Renem, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I'm just gonna say Ren. They will be our experienced traders, effective today. So if you do have any subscription that you are currently in, you can go ahead and pause that, as you will be free moving forward. I look for your continued support in the chat for our members, and I love to see all of your insights, so please continue to do so. And for the rest of the team, like I said, disclaimer, our analysts are going to be, I would say, heavily influenced by all of your account sizes. So, if I have a bad trade, Joyrider has a bad trade, Moen has a bad trade, good or bad, we all bear the weight of your financial situation. So it does weigh on us quite a bit. So it would be fairly hard for us to just give you signals constantly. For our experienced traders, they're in the same journey as you. They might be just a few steps ahead. So when it comes to whatever trades they're taking, I would not say blindly follow them. You should never blindly follow anyone to begin with. But their trades are going to be they're going to be their own an analysis and their own TA. Feel free to ask them questions, berate them. It's going to help them with their education as well, because the more you can teach, As more you can answer questions, the better you can teach the concepts that you believe in. So do keep pressuring them whenever they post something to elaborate, for your better understanding, for their better understanding. And yeah, congratulations to them. And you guys have a good evening. I'm gonna go ahead and